The Face of Alan Dulles by Michael Uhall. Alan Welsh Dulles, first civilian director of the CIA, went into his private office in Langley, Virginia, closed the door behind him, locked it, removed his face, and placed it carefully upon his desk. It was a perfectly fine face. Despite its age, 61 years and change, its surface remained remarkably smooth and free of blemishes. A small, careful white mustache decorated its upper lip. Disarticulated in this way, a casual observer, of which there were none, would be unlikely to recognize the face as belonging to Dulles. Indeed, it would be relatively easy to mistake the detached face for an unusually shaped or somewhat oversized piece of delicatessen turkey, or perhaps several such slices, haphazardly piled. The incongruity of their presence upon the mahogany expanse of Dulles's desk undoubtedly would be eclipsed by some act of rapid reparative violence. It would not do for an outsider to see the director's face in such a condition. For that matter, most of the officers and staff working in the CIA headquarters were uninformed about the itinerant status of the face of Alan Dulles. Only top agents were apprised of its condition, much less well acquainted with the feathery, wet strangeness that palpitated beneath it. At times, the face would be removed, placed in a discreetly unremarkable black leather briefcase, and transferred between undisclosed locations. Rarely were its chauffeurs informed of the contents of the briefcase, although some suspected their unorthodox nature. In late 1953, an agent tasked with carrying the briefcase to a classified location was overheard complaining to his female companion about a quiet chattering or vague hissing sound from inside. That evening, he fell asleep in a motel with the briefcase handcuffed to his wrist, as was strictly required by protocol. In the morning, another agent picked up the briefcase from an empty, blandly pristine room. Exactly what the face of Alan Dulles was good for remained uncertain. Why was it necessary to ferry the item around the city clandestinely when, intuitively, it would be much easier for Dulles simply to wear it to its destination? Not only would such a strategy have the benefit of long-standing convention, but removing the face for extended periods of time must have proved inconvenient for Dulles, as well as posing a security risk for the CIA itself. Exposing Dulles's face would undoubtedly place the company in a dubious position of undesirable exposure, especially given the geopolitical precarity of the time. Indeed, a classified 1958 internal transcript, discovered significantly later, recounts comments made by CIA Deputy Director of Plans Frank Wissner in a private meeting. Document number CIA-RDP432-0077-0007-454624-16. Blanked out name. So you think it needs to be disposed of? Wissner. After this colossal fuck-up with Sukarno, I don't think it's wise to let this goddamn freak thing just hang around telling people what to do. It's insane, and worse, it's unreliable. But it knows everything. What if the Reds get their hands on it? We can barely understand what it says anyway. Blanked out name. It's our opinion that the value it provides outweighs the risks. Wissner. You say that now, but wait until Doug Edwards is yelling about it on the set and the fucking cleavers are out for blood. Blanked out name. That's not going to happen, Frank. You're overreacting. Wissner. Besides, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Sometime after this meeting, Wissner collapsed in his office. Documents that were later declassified revealed he had been receiving years of electroshock therapy to treat a range of unspecified psychiatric disorders. In an unreleased diary his wife later burned, Wissner recorded the details of an extensive delusion to the effect that the ghost of Joseph Stalin had possessed his hands. The thought first occurred to Wissner upon signing a mortgage in 1947. It was especially horrifying as he staunchly maintained that the only thing he had in common with old Joe was a long-standing suspicion of Jewish doctors. At first, he would sit alone in the dark, all scotched up, first carefully inspecting one hand, then the other, like a curious beggar determining the contours of some unknown filthy object found in alleyway muck. "You cocksucker," he'd whisper, as awe and horror vied for control of his face. Extensive use of finger puppets in private therapeutic consultations afforded him no relief. Later in life, Wissner refused to remove his pair of thick black leather gloves, even when bathing, and especially in public. Like black balloons attached to his wrists, the gloves would gesticulate wildly as he delivered detailed ideological critiques of passers-by. His successor was named Richard M. Bissell, Jr., who later, with Dulles, organized the Bay of Pigs. Everything came to a head in November 1961 when John F. Kennedy forced Dulles to resign. Ostensibly, the reason involved Dulles's failed invasion attempt of Cuba, but some said Fidel Castro knew all about the face and threatened to expose it. It is likely that Cuban agents, posing as itinerant bakers, secretly acquired impresses of the face, which they baked into loaves of bread and smuggled into Soviet Russia for further study. After Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Dulles was appointed to the Warren Commission, where he was responsible for investigating the event and the suppressing of information about illegal CIA operations, to which Kennedy had been a party. Even the CIA now admits the existence of a benign cover-up, although historians place John McCone, Dulles's direct successor, at its heart. An official report, declassified in 2013, relates, McCone did not appear to have any explicit special understanding with Allen Dulles, although McCone clearly believed his predecessor would keep a dutiful watch over agency equities and work to keep the Commission from pursuing provocative lines of investigation, such as lethal anti-Castro covert actions. In other words, the Warren Commission actively suppressed demands to investigate further into the circumstances of Kennedy's death, hoping to occlude inquiries into its darker aspects. Whether or not this suggests that Dulles's face may have been involved in the assassination remains uncertain. If so, firing a bullet or bullets into Kennedy's flesh seems to lack the irony, sadism, or subtlety now considered characteristic of the face's various pursuits. Perhaps the face's anger over its owner's forced resignation was simply too cold to allow for dramatic flares. Alternatively, some psychogeographers suggest perhaps the multiple possible angles of fire on Kennedy chisel an invisible glyph over that part of Dallas. When you are there at Dealey Plaza, they say, you feel as though the emptiness behind its eyelids is fixed upon you. Perhaps it was trying to draw itself, and the epistemological nightmare that followed was its way of saying hello. James Jesus Angleton, the chief of CIA counterintelligence from 1954 to 1975, is now widely considered to have had a clinically paranoid personality. Historians of the intelligence community, who are divided into Angletonians and anti-Angletonians, disagree about whether or not his overwhelming suspicion regarding the prevalence of communist infiltration in American governance was justified. The true source of Angleton's paranoia is rarely commented on, namely his concerns about the origin of Allen Dulles's face. It was, of course, Dulles who appointed Angleton as the head of counterintelligence staff. At that time, relations between the two men were solid. Any concerns about the face were quashed by Angleton, at least until Dulles was ousted. That being said, Angleton always endeavored to keep tabs on the face and its whereabouts using a variety of counterintelligence tools. It was during the Golitsyn and Nesenko affair of 1964 that Angleton's anxiety about the face transformed into full-blown paranoia. It was also at this time that Angleton started refusing to leave his office, whispering covert instructions to his secretary through the crack underneath the door. In later years, his secretary would tell disturbing stories about Angleton's mental decline. In particular, she noted he had developed a complex, detailed theory to the effect that Dulles' face was responsible for the secret construction of a vast series of tunnels within CIA headquarters. He alleged these tunnels were no bigger than rat runs, existing for the sole purpose of allowing the face to slither and inch where it pleased. Angleton hissed his theory at any of the very few people he still trusted. "We have to say it's just about the commies," he'd say, lips wet with nervous spittle. "If this gets out, there won't even be an America anymore." Teeth grinding, he would elaborate in hushed tones and proclaim, "If they knew what was going on here, what that thing is doing." His voice would trail off, and he would stare into the middle distance, consumed by plans to counteract its agenda. But no one knew if the face even had an agenda. Angleton is sometimes credited with laying the foundations of the American mass surveillance apparatus. This is usually attributed to his zealous pursuit of communist agents, double agents, triple agents, and moles. Needless to say, it is difficult to imagine that a preoccupation with Dulles' face played no part in his desire to place everyone and everything under constant surveillance. One of Angleton's deepest fears was that there might be more than one. Reflecting upon this period, it is difficult to avoid imagining Angleton swearing under his breath as he frantically tears books down from the shelves in his office. Papers and tomes lay scattered across the institutional gray carpet. Sweat stains mar his armpits, and he turns to you, eyes beady and imploring. "It creeps around inside my bookshelf," he says plaintively. "It sneaks behind the books, and sometimes, when I think it's just me, I'll see a copy of Masters of Deceit, Jitter, and Twitch. And I know it's there. It's like it's checking in on me. I haven't caught it yet, but I will. I will." He laughs, like a misfiring machine gun. "I just have to find the hole it crawls in through." In 1971, a janitor filed a complaint report after discovering that Angleton had placed hundreds of stainless steel rat traps throughout the building, one of which broke the janitor's finger in 4 places. More traps were found on top of ceiling tiles, behind toilets, and stuffed into ventilation shafts. No rats were caught, but Angleton's traps continued to be found until at least 1983. Richard M. Helms, director of Central Intelligence at the time, privately chastised Angleton for his behavior and the misappropriation of funds used to buy the traps. "I refuse to subsidize this madness," Helms fumed in a private memo. "Dulles has been dead for 2 years. All these rumors aren't helping anyone. Nixon doesn't even believe the face exists. Kissinger is poisoning his mind." Whether or not the face of Allen Dulles indeed liked to infiltrate Angleton's bookshelves, or a secret network of tunnels still exists inside the CIA headquarters, it remains understandable how the possibility of both could have disturbed even the most stable of personalities. When the face finally revealed itself to the masses, historical circumstances had changed profoundly. The revelation itself was an anticlimactic affair. It was the subsequent existential crisis that got all the attention. Blustering and outraged political pundits asked questions. How long did the CIA know about the face? Where did the face come from? What does the face want? Conspiracy theorists wanted to know if the face was directly responsible for Kennedy's assassination, any of them. More phlegmatic commentators, such as professors and public intellectuals, posed more troubling questions. Why did the government keep the existence of the face hidden from us? And does this undermine the very foundations of democracy? Some even dared to ask the question on everyone's mind, what exactly is a face, anyway? The fact of the matter remains that the American people were intensely disturbed by the discovery of Allen Dulles' face, because for them it represented a dark past that many imagined long gone. We had got rid of all the faces back then, people said, precisely to avoid problems like this one. If you don't have anything to hide, what do you need a face for? Feathery, wet strangenesses everywhere were greatly unsettled. In the distant future, many suspect the face of Allen Dulles will endure. Perhaps the human race will have died out by then, and one could picture the face locked away in a decaying drawer somewhere, like an old, wrinkled piece of leather, muttering ciphers to itself as it awaits some unfortunate extraterrestrial discoverer. Or, as a prominent senator suggested recently, perhaps we should encapsulate the face in a sealed tube and fire the tube into space. This, the senator said, would serve two goals. On the one hand, it would finally get the face out of our business, thereby resolving the host of complications its uncovering entailed. On the other hand, the idea of Dulles' face traveling, unsupervised, through the void forever, surveying each asteroid and iota it passes, would be almost too terrible to consider. Not to mention, there would always be the possibility that, due to some irony of geometry, the face might eventually return to our planet's orbit. From there, it would look down upon our homes from its position beyond the sky, alien, baleful, and enigmatic.